So today we're talking about one of the biggest bugbears in my life and what causes a heck of a lot of friction in the Taylor household, and it is that of devices. The amount of time that I spend running around my house, chasing after my kids and sometimes my wife to remind them about their tech use, getting them off of PS5s, getting them off tablets, getting them away from televisions and mobile phones that are so intuitive to use. It's really causing a lot of stress at the time of recording, and something that I think not only me as a family and a household, but a society as a whole needs to get a bit of a grip around. So I'm delighted that I've managed to find an expert around the topic who happens to be a dad of 3 himself, just like myself. But more importantly, here comes from a tech background and now works to help workplaces and individuals manage their tech boundaries or tech rules, as we're going to talk about today. Alex, please do introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and where are you joining us from today?
Yeah, I'm not sure who you were talking about just then, but
yeah, he couldn't make it, so we got you instead, right?
so I'm Alexander Bell. Q jokes about the inventor of the telephone, which I've had throughout my entire life. And yeah, essentially, exactly as you said, I work with organizations and speak to audiences. And it's not about me having the answers, because I have some answers that work for me, but fundamentally the principles are technology is everywhere. It's not going anywhere. I've worked in tech for most of my life and probably will continue to do for the rest of my life. I love it. I had a pager back before my even first phone. I must have been 9 years old. And one of my best friends at school, his dad worked for BT Cellnet back then. Massive employer in the region, obviously in Sheffield. And so he got us these pages. What the hell were 9-year-olds doing with pages back in like 1995?
You know what? I remember doing exactly the same. I looked in Argos catalogue, thinking, I need a page.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had one. Obviously, you couldn't reply on pages. You just got a message, and you had to find a payphone and do a reverse call charges back to home. To figure out what was going on. But yeah, I've grown up there. Absolutely love technology, but it's just reached a point where both as a dad and professionally and society as a whole, I think we're at a point where we just need to really think about our relationship with technology and where we want it to move to moving forwards, and how much we're actually happy for it to enter our lives and rule our lives. And that's where this idea of tech rules comes from, because we all have tech rules. We've all developed these habits and behaviors over time, but most of those it's been manipulated. We've been on the receiving end of tens of thousands of very, very clever engineers, usually in Silicon Valley, who have been paid a fortune to study psychology and user interfaces and figure out ways to actually, increase our usage of apps and platforms and devices, right from, how we swipe and the endless scroll that was brought in, through to daft things like remember the poke button on Facebook?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Strange thing, wasn't
it? So, even stuff like that, you got some Harvard graduate coming up with that concept going, do you know what? We can get people absolutely hooked on Facebook if we just introduce this concept called poke. Yeah, can you imagine me sat in the boardroom when that idea was floated?
And they voted it through by poking at each other.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, I just want this wider conversation of, look, what is our relationship with tech? What do we want it to be? And how can we get there? And that's what I talk about.
No, I think it's a very timely conversation, certainly for me, which is why I'm so much looking forward to where it goes today, because it is something that we struggle with. And how has it changed? Why is it you're doing what you do? What is the purpose? What risks have you seen? What makes you do what you do? Because tech's good, right?
I'm a huge advocate for technology. I still to this day run a reality media group, so 360 virtual tour production company. So I'm very much still in the industry, and it got to a stage where during sort of the pandemic, the lockdown periods, everything got moved home. I had just gadgets all over the house because we were still having to work on projects and get them out the door. And as you said, I have 3 boys. So at the time, our eldest, Dexter, was 7. And he came in, burst in, kind of said, "Dad, I've been thinking about Christmas." And he's born on the 23rd of December. So he knows that he can combine presents sometimes and all the rest of it. So he said, "Dad, I've been thinking about Christmas, my birthday, and I know what I really, really want." And every parent, reacts the same at this conversation.
Yeah.
The eyes roll back and you
Stomach
think,
sinks.
here we go. And he said, "Loads of my friends have got one, and I know that you've got an old one that you never really use." And, so he really thought this through. And he said he wants an iPhone for Christmas. And my head just went into parent mode. And I kind of said, "No, Dexter, they're bad for your health. They're highly addictive. They're dangerous. You're far too young. You're not having one." And he just turned around and said, and Dexter's the good kid. He's the reason why we had 2 more. He was like the perfect baby. So, totally sweet and innocent still to this day. And he just turned around and said, "Well, Dad, if they're really that bad, why are you and Mummy on yours all the time?" And it was just one of those moments where I had no answer to that. And it just made me reflect on my own relationship with technology, how that was impacting others and the people I care, more than anything in the world about. And it just really turned on a light bulb for me. And I started researching about it, and the more I thought about it and looked into it, the more I realized that this is such a huge problem. Not just the parenting aspect and the relationship between parents and kids, which is frightening when you read the research about the fact that from, is it week 12 or 13, in the womb, they can hear outside sounds and things. Well, one of the most common sounds that they're now picking up on is that vibration or the ping from the notification or the sounds from the mother's phone. Because that is one of the sounds that happens more frequently than anything else. And so there are studies that are showing that babies are now being born with this sense of feeling that there is something that's getting in the way between them and mother, and it's a phone, right? It's technology.
Is that actually
Yeah. I mean, it's very hard to prove what a baby is thinking, but in terms of how they are reacting to when mother has a device in hand and when mother doesn't have a device, they just know that this thing they're in competition with it. And you just think, yeah, that's really bad. Like, that can't be a healthy thing for humanity. And so the more I've gone into it, the more I kind of realized that this is something that I'm going to have to deal with as a parent with 3 boys. Dexter's now 9. So we're getting to a point where the phone conversation is going to come up. So I know I've got to get my act in order to really deal with their journey through technology. And that is my why. If nothing else, I'm able to be a better parent and help them with their relationship with technology. That's enough for me. But it just so happens that I'm quite good on stage and I'm quite good at speaking to audiences and things. So
you love having a conversation.
Yeah. So if I can help others with this as well, not just on the parental aspects, but in business as well, then great.
It's a fascinating discussion, isn't it? Because I think the responsibility, I guess, starts with us as parents.
Yeah.
But we were talking just before we hit record about we're almost the first generation. I'm 38. I believe you're 36.
Yep.
That grew up with tech. We were tech native? Is that right? And now the kids that are getting born are obviously intertwined in their lives. I think I was 16 when I got a mobile phone, and it was pretty much to phone home to say if I was going to be back late from work.
Yeah.
There was no other means of communicating. It was that and an SMS that cost you 12 pence a time.
Yeah.
Whereas now we've got things that they're not phones, they're computers in our pockets. It's like it's almost an extension of us. And I think you said something that your eldest said to you, it's like, why are they such a bad thing when you yourself are never off them? And my God, it's true, isn't it? The amount of times I go home and I'm almost telling them to get off as my right hand that I hold my phone in is looking to see if anyone's emailed me. Like, what am I doing? But we know we're doing it.
Yeah.
But we almost can't stop. And isn't that the sign of an addiction? How can we start to tell if we are falling into the trap? What are the telltale signs?
Well, if you Google, are we addicted to our phones? One of the top answers that comes up says that if you study the brain when it's using a phone and a device, then the way that it's, the way that it's working is very similar to a brain that's on cocaine. So, that's the level of impact that it's having on our brains when we're activating the dopamine hits and all of that kind of level of chemicals going on up there. So it is an addiction. And everybody has different levels of that addiction for sure. But fundamentally, if you are, catching yourself on your device and it's getting in the way of other aspects of your life, then that can be defined as an addictive behavior. So we are addicted, and it is basically like cocaine to our brains. So when you are thinking about giving a child a phone, what you're really saying is, here's a bag of cocaine, just don't use it at the dinner table. Now that's an extremist view,
but even that's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah. But essentially, that's how powerful these devices are. And when you talk about platforms, having an age limit of 13 plus, and you're giving a phone to an 11-year-old because they're starting secondary school, there's issues with that. It's like society's cigarettes. How long did it take for cigarettes to eventually get the warnings on the packaging and those pictures and, rotting organs and all that kind of stuff? Well, we're not far off that with phones, really. They should be coming with a warning, especially if it's been given to teens or younger, because they are so dangerous. It's Pandora's box, essentially.
Yeah, there's so much to, as you're speaking, I'm sort of trying to think if we're responsible as parents, to go back to my previous point, does some responsibility on addiction not lie with not necessarily the hardware creators, but YouTube content creators who speak in that fast, overblown tone all the time to make you watch for no real value or reason? And you mentioned earlier on in your introduction about Facebook and the continuous scroll and the algorithm. Their job, I guess, if you're a developer at Facebook, is to keep you on the platform to sell more ads. So is there a responsibility on these? They're not publishers, they say, do they? But platforms that enable you to produce content like that. Because the stuff that my 6 and 4-year-old watch on YouTube is just mindless, benign nonsense. But they wake up at 6:45 in the morning. Where's my tablet? I want my tablet. Where is it?
Yeah.
And it's horrible to break that cycle. They don't watch television, they watch YouTube.
Yeah.
And how do you break it? Can we break that?
No, I don't think we can. And that's sort of where I've got to. I'm actually just about to start some hypnotherapy sort of therapy, I guess, with a friend of mine, and we're going to try and really get to the root of some of my own sort of technology behaviors. And that's going to be fascinating to kind of see if there is, anything else kind of underneath fundamentally that is causing these addictions. But I think they are so widespread that it's just the fact that it's David versus Goliath. These platforms are so cleverly designed, and the algorithms are so finely tuned into what we want and what we need. And you look at how AI is influencing those algorithms now, and the scale of development and data that has been amassed from our own use of these platforms for years and years and years. We're reaching a point where the platforms and the algorithms know us far better than we know ourselves. And when you start to add in different layers of technology, Apple's just released, their vision for spatial computing with their headset that's going to be coming out next year. And that tracks your eye movements in order to interact with the interface. So they're getting data on exactly where you're looking, what you're looking at, and for how long. So, the levels of intrusiveness and the avatars almost that they're building of you and what they think you're going to, the manipulative systems is just incredible. Like, we stand absolutely no chance of being able to get past these. They're going to know exactly what we want when we want it. You all have that experience now where you go on to one of the platforms, Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is, and you see an advert for something that you've been talking to other people about, and everybody now thinks, oh, well, that's because it's listening to us. It's obviously just listening to our conversations. No, it's not listening to you, but it knows by what you're pausing on or scrolling back up to have a second look at, or what you're tapping, or the friends that you know, it just knows the profile of you. So it knows that when you want a red car, that it's going to serve you up with those adverts for red cars. So we just don't stand a chance. But I'm not necessarily anti that technology. I think it's incredible, and some of the advances in science and research, and it is going to be amazing, and is amazing. But when it's used purely for advertising profits, that's where I do agree that actually they need to share some of the responsibility. But they're not going to share the responsibility. These guys are more powerful than entire economies. So, again, it's not even David versus Goliath. It's ant versus Mars territory. So, therefore, if we can just have a greater sense of awareness as to what's actually causing our behaviors and driving our addictions, then we can start to climb out of the pit a little bit and actually spot what's triggering those actions and going, right, okay, yeah, I need a bit of time out. And I think the younger generations need to learn from us, because as you're right, we're the guinea pigs. We can just remember a time when there wasn't any of this, and we've kind of grown up with that technology. So I think if we can start to kind of hold our hands up and say, actually, this isn't that good, I have a problem and I'm trying to deal with that problem, then hopefully we can inspire the younger generations to go, yeah, do you know what? Yeah, we're not going to follow in your footsteps. We're going to do things differently.
Yeah, I want to come on to the how to spot triggers question in a little bit, but you said something else earlier on as well. I want to just jump back on where how to spot if you're addicted might be to check if your phone is becoming a distraction. I guess it's so hard to distinguish that. And is there a way of identifying if it's a distraction or of a benefit? Because what's the very first thing you do when you go on holiday? Where shall we eat tonight? I'll just have a look. Which airline shall we go with? I'll just have a look. Where shall we stay? I'll just have a look. Which car shall we hire? It's such a beneficial part, and I do believe that is a benefit. It's making our lives easier in that respect, also a bit lazier. So how do we check in with ourselves to see if what we're about to do or are doing is a distraction? Do you have any sort of advice around that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think most people now are stressed before they even get dressed. Right? So we wake up, our device is on the side of our bed. We dive straight into those before even saying hello to whoever else is in your bed at that time. It can be the kids, can be the wife, can be whoever. We just dive straight into there, and that can be into emails, into socials, into news, into whether we find excuses. What's really interesting about this is if you think back to a time, the early sort of times when these platforms were starting to come about and phones weren't that good. Can you remember going onto your phone and going, actually, there isn't really anything to do on this apart from play Snake? So we turn to them, we kind of go, there's not a lot to do here, but I'm still going to do it anyway. And I remember even times through college when some of those early platforms were starting to exist, but I just didn't have the social circles. So I'd be going on my phone and I didn't have any new messages. Nobody, cared. So, but you would just try and look busy. Yeah. And you'd end up standing there in a corridor and just jumping back between, a news app or your email that's got nothing new in it, or I'll just have a look in spam because I've literally got nothing else to do. So even back then, when there wasn't this plethora of content out there, you still were trying to interact with this thing. And I think it's a way of dealing with the difficulties of life. Back then in college, it's easier to turn to a phone and look busy or popular than it is to actually try and become popular face to face with people. Now, maybe that's a bit more of a personal thing to me, because I'd moved from Rotherham down to Henley-on-Thames. So I was thrown into this college where, my accent stood out, like anything. In fact, I even remember I took English, and one of the first lessons was all about dialect. And I remember having this, just being used as this, oh, Alex has a dialect. Let's discuss that, because none of us have a dialect. We speak the Queen's English. So, let's focus on, and I just remember feeling like an outcast from day one.
So almost like, I wish I had my phone to sync into. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So for some people, diving straight into these is a way of just avoiding real life. And I think that's kind of a real deep question, and not everybody's in that situation, but I think specifically teenagers, I think that a lot of the anxiety stems from that. That sort of social pressure. But to come back to, because I've gone way off.
No, it's good. Carry on, it's good.
But to come back to what you're saying about, we dive straight in and the triggers and things like that. And when can you when is it right? Yeah, when is it right to use a phone, and when is it wrong to use a phone? I think it's just about looking at your surroundings and your environment and going, right, okay, just taking a breath and going, what am I about to do? What very clearly am I about to do, and what am I not going to do? So therefore, if you're going on to research a restaurant for later in the day, or if you're going on Google Maps to figure out how long it's going to take you to get to your meeting that you're about to drive to, just go on Google Maps. Don't go on anything else. And you need to catch yourself from, oh, I'll just have a quick, because as soon as you do that, they've got you, they've absolutely got you, and 5, 10, 15 minutes will go by.
So perhaps it's an intent thing, because Google's based around intent, isn't it? Answering questions. Facebook, I guess, and other social platforms are about dwell time. Let's interrupt with things. So maybe put a lock on that if you want to.
And there's some great apps that can help you do that. One of my most favorite, it's a relatively new app that's come out called Unplug, but it's with a Q, so UNPLUQ. And they have a great app that you can set blocks up on different apps, and if you want to use it, it gives you a series of physical challenges to get into it. So you have to shake your phone in order to open the app for like 10 seconds, or you have to do a little kind of swipe test to try and. So it puts like an active kind of block in between you and the app, and half the time you get half the way through it and you think, this is ridiculous. Do I really need to go on Instagram? And you're doing this. But they go a step further, which is where it gets really clever. And they have this NFC tag that you can buy with the app. So you get this little plastic key ring. And if there's a certain app or certain time of day or whatever it is that you've identified as a really bad time for you, you can pull in these apps and it will happen at a certain time. And you have to physically get this tag and bring it to the back of your phone, the NFC bit at the back of your phone, to unlock the app in order to then use. Now, if you can be bothered to do that, then fine, go for it, knock yourself out. But 9 times out of 10, you realize how ridiculous it is when you start doing that. So there are lots of things that can help, but essentially it's about being mindful and intentional about your usage. And it's so hard to do. It is just so hard to do.
It is, because it's permanently knocking. It's permanently giving you notifications. Your friend did this. You've got a new email. You've done this. Even if I haven't got an email, I sometimes refresh it to make sure I've not got an email.
I'm terrible for that.
And around the sort of waking up in the morning, I have Spotify, so I listen to podcasts. I have Audible, so I read books. I have news, so I listen to that. It just happens my email's there as well. My social feeds there. I don't have Facebook on my phone now, and I find that's really helpful. Because that just becomes, just have a look. You're not really focused on this or this. I want to jump back, if you don't mind, around. You mentioned around hypnotherapy. You mentioned around I look down to my phone to not engage with real life. I agree. I think that might be a growing problem, but I wonder how you see that developing, where kids are creating, and adults to a point, digital versions of what they want you to see versus what actually happens. And are they creating a life that's genuinely happier online than their actual physical existence?
So there's there's 2 points to this. I think there's one which is I'm going to get really quite deep now. In the Western developed world, life is pretty good for pretty much all of us. The opportunities of life, we've got everything at our feet. We've got water, energy, heat, food, stuff to do, jobs, lives, social circles. Life's pretty good. So you can legitimately say, well, just escaping into this digital world, you need to be back out here in the real world, because that's where we all are and that's where we should live. I think there's a wider question, which is about the next couple of billion people who are starting to come online now. And I kind of link it a little bit to the climate change conversation, because we're kind of saying, well, we did it the dirty way, but you really shouldn't. You should use clean energy from the get-go, otherwise we're all doomed. And it's a little bit like that with technology, because if we're kind of trying to limit and eradicate this idea of, well, I'll just live in an online world because the real world's too much. Who's to say that's right or wrong? And I think that's quite an interesting conversation. But I don't think we'll get there for some time. This concept of the metaverse, which has been floating around for a while, the technology to actually drive that idea forward, where you've got millions of people interacting in a space in full sort of 3D immersive view. You need some, having 100 users on Minecraft on a Minecraft server is already quite a challenge.
Pushing the bounds of what's possible, isn't it?
So having 1 million people with their 3D avatar interacting with each other, we're way off that. So it kind of gets a bit dystopian to really worry. But the power of the headsets and what Apple are kind of putting their flag in the sand and saying, we want spatial computing to be the next frontier, that's a 5, 10, 15-year play from Apple. And that's the future that they want. I don't know if you saw the launch and some of the marketing that they did around the launch of their headset that's coming out next year. But I've got a really crude mock-up that I use. So this is what they envisage, where you've got a headset on and you can see the person's eyes through the headset. It's kind of borderline.
Oh, really?
It's kind of borderline ridiculous, but it answers a fundamental challenge that we've had in VR headsets for some time, which is how do you maintain contact with the real world when you've got a headset on? So this is their way of kind of doing that, and they've got a toggle on the headset where you can kind of merge the two views together, and you can see the actual space and then have interfaces that will overlay in the real space. But somebody looking at you at a headset, you can turn it to almost fully transparent, and they'll see your eyes. It'll be a digital representation of your eyes, but it will be your eyes. And so there's an advert that they played during the launch where there's a dad in the kitchen. He's got the headset on and he's, doing Minority Report level stuff. And the kid comes in and kicks a football to him. Well, number one, you shouldn't be kicking a football in the kitchen. but we'll skip over
number one.
we'll skip over that. And with the headset on, the headset recognizes something's coming towards him, and it goes into sort of transparent mode, and he sees the football, controls it, passes it back, all with the headset on, and the sun goes on. Now, I have a major issue with that concept, because you're now putting a level of technology in between me and my son that doesn't need to be there.
Like you mentioned earlier with the phone and kids seeing it as a barrier, right?
Yeah. But actually having, one physically in front of your eyes is way too far. And I'm just not on board with that concept at all. So I just don't agree that it's a good way for humanity to go in terms of having these, because it's not too crazy an idea to say that, well, at the moment we're about, I think, post 16, so 16 and older, I think it's about 74% people wear some form of glasses or contact lenses. So if you've got 75% of the population with these on, it's not much of a stretch when the technology catches up, and it's no different to having a pair of glasses on, that you'll see mass adoption.
Yeah,
you know, you've
for
seen
the minute,
it.
they're just silly things that.
Yeah, they're crazy, but that's version one. The technology will get there. Might take 10 years, might take 15 years, but it will get there. And at that point, that's where I hope that humanity will just kind of go, that's too much. Enough is enough. It's not adding to the sense of human connection. It's just getting in the way.
Yeah. And there was a quote once, I think it might have been Google's CEO at the time, or Amazon perhaps, saying the kids of today won't know a home that they couldn't speak to.
Yeah.
And I think that at the time, I remember going, that's outrageous.
Yeah.
And the rate of change is getting beyond silly. The things that are creeping in, we talked to Alexa, we talked to Google, we talked to smart devices. The kids don't even have to move to get things on the television. What are we, at risk of sounding like a grumpy old man? It is.
I'm definitely a grumpy old man.
It weren't like that when I were a kid. Why are you doing it? I mean, are we missing out? Are they the lucky ones? It's just, it's honestly, it challenges me.
Well, if you look at Alexa, I haven't met a child that has improved their ability to speak to another human by way of using Alexa. So, and again, there was a study, I can't remember where it was, but you see it, we live this stuff, where children are going into primary schools and speaking to teachers like they speak to Alexa, and there's just, it's rude, right? And it's just totally obnoxious, and it's just not a way that you would actually engage with a human. And if we did that, back when we were kids, we'd get a clip round the ear. That's not how you speak to people. Alexa, do this, do that,
teacher, do this.
give me this. Give. There's no, it's all about me, and it's all about, I need this instant gratification, and I'm not doing it for myself. So I just don't see how that's really, apart from laziness, I don't see how it's benefiting, or teaching kids manners or skills or anything else. I just, and I'm the bad cop for this, but I just refuse to have one in the house because A, for that reason, but actually the real reason is because all they'll do all the time is Alexa, play fart noises.
Yeah.
And then you've got about 10 minutes of different categories of fart being played.
Mine have actually done that. They have actually done that. There's a 24-hour fart playlist on Spotify or something. Or I've been in the car listening to Spotify and it gets taken over by what the kids have put on, and it's just they're infiltrated. On a serious note.
But you see it everywhere, even in my family, and obviously I'm the bad guy talking about this stuff, but we'll go to friends and family's houses, and you see the adults doing it as well. Alexa, do this. Alexa, the biggest one that annoys me is Alexa, make an announcement, and then it makes that announcement over all the other Alexas, and you just think, just get off your ass, go upstairs, see what they're doing, and have a conversation with them. Like, why do you need to do that via a device? And we just go along with it because A, we think it's cool, and B, we think it's socially acceptable because other people are doing it. Well, when the kids see that, that's when they kind of just inherently think, well, that's what we all need to do, and that's the way we need to be. And I don't think that's a good thing at all.
What I'm getting here is that it goes back to that responsibility. There's a responsibility for us as parents to set boundaries and rules around it, and how we do and don't allow tech to infiltrate or integrate into our lives. I like what you said earlier. My ears pricked up when you said they're going to school and talking like they would to Alexa, not because they're building connections, but because they're very selfish. Is tech making us raise selfish kids?
I think in a lot of aspects, I think it is. Now, I think there's a lot of benefits that technology is bringing. There's a brilliant piece of work that's being done. I think it's over in Sri Lanka, where there's a professor who he won the first TED Prize. So I think back then, this was, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, where TED would award $1 million to the best idea and things like that. And he won the first ever TED Prize. And that idea was to go into rural communities it might have been in India or Africa, and put these sort of community computers and computer screens and make them available to everyone, and had these like booths put up in these communities and just watch what happens. They've had no experience with technology before at all. And it was fascinating. And they ended up, doing a lot of silly stuff, but they ended up educating themselves. It had access to the internet. So they were starting to learn things and teach others. And it became this real hub of the community, which was brilliant to watch and see. And he's gone a step further now, and he's doing a pilot study in Sri Lanka at the moment, where he's trying to sort of advocate for use of phones in exams, right? Wow. Really controversial. And his point being that if you look at the very top of the education system, so PhDs, how's a PhD awarded? Well, you basically go and find a load of research by other people, pull it all together, put your opinion on top of that, come up with some new hypothesis, and that's your doctorate, that's your thesis. And the way that we kind of mark that is by interviewing you about it and asking you questions about it. So if that kind of capsulizes the epitome of academic skill, then why can't that filter all the way down through the system? Why can't an exam be about, you've got access to all the information you want, but you've got to bring it together, you've got to dissect it, you've got to analyze it, and you've got to construct an argument based on multiple sources. And I think that's a really interesting idea. He's got his work cut out because schools are all, just ban phones and it's not our problem territory. Yeah. And you can understand why, of course. But yeah, fascinating concept. So I think technology can be a huge aid. And if you think about, how quickly we've been able to advance as a society, and how anybody can be creative now, it's got some real wins for kids, and from an ability to learn anything from anywhere, I think benefits humanity on the whole. But when it comes down to, essentially giving your attention away for some profits in Silicon Valley, then it becomes a problem. And when it starts to impact your behaviors, in a negative way, and you're starting to miss out on other aspects of life and your relationships and things like that, then it becomes a problem. But if you're a child and that's your starting point, then you can't really blame them. It's us. We've driven this. It hasn't been anybody else who's been going on Facebook from the early days and YouTube on the early days and driving the profits. It's been us. We're the ones who's been on the platforms. So, we've got to take responsibility for ourselves. Yes, there is blame to be shared, of course, from the people who are profiting. But it's us as users that chose to use those platforms in the first place. So, I think we have to take some responsibility, but there's two sides to it, as I said. So there's the side of how is this impacting us? And there's the other side, which is, okay, well, if we do something about it, what does that look like? And if you simply just take away the technology, it doesn't solve the problem. You've got to replace that with an equal measure of either real life dopamine hits or real life social connection. Because just taking it away, just going upstairs and saying, right, Freddie, you've had enough time on that now, I'm taking it out of your bedroom, isn't dealing with the issue. It's just going to cause further anger, because you're just removing his source or their source of cocaine, as I said earlier. Sounds terrible.
But you know what? I fall exactly into that trap. I do. We go up, it's like, right, tablets are done, and it gets
get off it. Yeah.
And that's it, the cold turkey in a cake. Oh,
yeah. Well, yeah. And because the connection that they've got is so strong with that device, we think it's silly, and they're just watching daft Minecraft videos. For them, for some kids, that might be their best friend, because they don't have that best friend in real life, because all they've ever done is gone on Minecraft. So what you're taking away, what we think is just mind-numbing, stupid content, for them might genuinely, legitimately be their entire social life. So you've just got to really think about that. And when they get older, I'm not quite there with our boys yet, but there's a book that I read I didn't read it. That's a total lie. I listened to it in the car on Audible. But I did buy a physical copy to kind of, be one of these bookcase idiots that, look at these. Never read any of them.
The books I've never read, the spines are still perfect.
Which is called Behind Their Screens, which is a study of I think it was about 120,000 teens in America. And they really dived into the psychology behind what they were doing. And what they found was the complexities of the social circles that they were dealing with through, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, all of these different channels. Because there's, I think on Snapchat, I don't use Snapchat. I've never been on, but I'm aware that you have these, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a thread. So, and you have to, I think, be active on that thread with another person within 24 hours to keep it alive every 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
And it keeps a running total. So you've got people who have had these conversations that are still alive, for like 3 years or something ridiculous. And it becomes then an obligation to keep that conversation going. You can't
let that fall. You can't be the one that fails.
And so if you let that fall, suddenly it's like, well, you don't want to be friends with me. And I can see that you're online. So I can see that you're online with other people. And I know that you've just commented on Instagram and blah, blah, blah. So there's all these like footprints that are left that other people can watch you and see you. So it just brings this sense of there's nowhere to hide. If I remember when I was a kid, if you didn't want to bump into the bully, you hid in one of the classrooms. Well, you can't.
A different way back from school or something.
You can't do that anymore. So it's just a total different world, and it's a
young
frightening world. I don't think I would. I would have made it through. To be perfectly honest, thinking about my childhood, and I had a pretty reasonable time at secondary school. I wasn't Mr. Popular, but I wasn't at the bottom of the pile. I was just in the middle. But moving from there to down south to college and everything else, if we'd have been today, I think I'd have had serious problems. Luckily, technology wasn't at a level where it was my entire life, and I found the pub at age 15 instead. So
where real connections are made.
So but I seriously question whether I would make it through today.
I had a conversation similar to this that's on the YouTube and the podcast around boys, how he works with schools to help boys and girls have better conversations, because he said it is such a challenging time to be young right now, and boys feel their worst fear is humiliation, and girls, I think he said their worst fear was not having a friend. Ultimately, and it goes way back to evolution and how we grew up and evolved. And I wonder how do you think digital or tech is affecting connections and relationships for kids and adults? Is it connecting us, or is it actually testing that?
No, it's I don't believe it is. I think it's a false level of connection. And again, there's studies that back this up, that go through the different levels of stimulation that you need to be able to feel connected to somebody in a conversation. Zoom helps because I can see you, I can see what you're doing, you can see me, we can hear each other. But that's where it stops. If this was in a real room, I'd be able to feel you, and I'd be able to pick up on your breathing a lot more, and I'd be able to, share the kind of the sense of space and the environment that we're in. And I would know that you're not distracted by other windows or anything else going on. So that's another heightened level, of kind of sense that we're able to dial into. So technology, regardless how good it's going to get, it's never going to replace or be as good as being there in the moment with somebody. And one thing that I talk about is that we can be connected with our device and the internet, everything else, but the more connected we are, the less connected we are to the people who are actually around us. And when you think about that, those people that are around you are probably the ones you die for. They're the ones that you really care about. And it's so easy to feel like, well, I must be connected to all these people who are, typically further away. And it's actually pushing those that are nearest to you further away, making you further apart. And I think that's really sad. But I think it's true, and that's what going back to the start of this and my why. That's what Dexter obviously picked up on. You know, when he was like, his sense was obviously these things are so great that my parents are on them all the time. I naturally want one of myself, and I have the conversation with him now, and you know, he was probably expecting me to be to kind of go, great, welcome to the team. Here you go. You know, let's all connect.
Yeah, finally, he wants one.
Yeah. But to be met with this, no, this is all really bad, and you can't have one, and blah blah blah. You know, he's right and natural to question that. And he was obviously picking up on that and doing. And when you look around, you see it all the time. You know, people are just not connected with what's directly in front of them. And there's a great quote by Alexander Graham Bell, the real one, the real one, who said, and he said this over 150 years ago: "We walk through life with our eyes shut. There are things all around us, right at our very feet, that we never see because we never really look." And you just think, well, that just encapsulates everything, you know, because we just don't look anymore at the world around us. We're just so constantly ingrained on this tiny thing that's in our pocket, or the one that's on our wrists. And in 15 years down the line, the things that are on in front of our eyes. So, you know, that's the problem. That's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, that's a quote that rings true, I guess. I didn't even mean to do that one.
Yeah, nice.
I'm sorry.
Nice.
I'm very sorry. It leads to I guess a final couple of points I wouldn't mind touching on if you're happy to. One that I noticed on your website was talking about tech burnout. I wanted to sort of dive into a bit around what is that? How can we see it? How can we avoid it and overcome it? Good luck with that in a few minutes. And then around your theory of tech rules to round us off. So if you could start with sort of tech burnout.
Yeah, so we've got about another 3 hours to go.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite easy to draw the line between feeling burnt out at work and how technology is playing the part in that. So I kind of say, well, the way I think about this is if I'm a good dad at home, it makes me a better dad in the office. And what I mean by that is I'm not necessarily playing the dad role in the office to my staff and colleagues, but I know that I'm in the headspace that if I can have boundaries and really define my sort of roles between the two and be a better dad at home because I'm not being as distracted by the stuff at work, well, it works both ways. Because if you fall into this area where you feel behind and you're anxious around the work and you're waking up in the morning, you're diving into your inbox more for fear out of anything else, because you just want to know what more you have to deal with today, then that is impacting your home life for sure, and your ability to be a parent and be present in the moment with your kids. So the ways that I kind of try and deal with that is acknowledge it. Just take a minute before, you know, I have a home office as well as a real office, and I've had some form of home office for about 15 years now. So I've got relatively good at being able to kind of keep everything in one room and just take a minute before I step out and kind of go, right, that is work. I'm now about to be a dad. So I just need to you know, get my dad head on and go. It's not easy. It doesn't always work, but just taking a second to kind of, you know, think about that. And you can take it to a next level and have a physical thing as well. Take your shirt off, get changed. Yeah. You know, if you're working from home, kind of have that, go and take a shower. If it's been a really bad day, go and have a shower, get out the shower, be a dad and turn off.
So that transitions, sort of you're transitioning from role to role, and how you can create those boundaries.
Yeah, and people used to do it with commutes, but not everybody commutes anymore. And way back in the olden days, you know, they didn't have the ability to take the laptops or the physical computers home with them. Maybe a bit of paperwork, but that would be about it. So that's how they used to deal with it. You know, we just need to think about those boundaries and those zones. And if you can, you know, one of the best kind of pieces of advice that that I give is if you can have, work devices and personal devices, that's a really good way of being able to separate the two. Don't just have it all on one device. Have it very clear that that's a work phone, that's my work laptop. It stays in the office, or it stays in my work bag, or stays in the boot of the car, or whatever. And then you're able to really move on from that. Because if you blur the two, then the temptation and the opportunity of just consuming more is always going to be there. So it's about trying to really set up boundaries. And again, in the home, and something that I try and do with the kids, it's a running argument that I have with my wife about TVs in bedrooms. So I had a TV in the bedroom as a kid. That led to having the console and the TV running the phone wire all the way up the stairs and plugged into.
Get off the phone. I want to go to the internet. Yeah.
So I had all that, and it's not a good thing, really. So I've taken a very anti-TV in bedroom stance. My wife hates me for it, but that's I'm not backing down on it. And we're trying to get to a situation where it's kind of as tech-free as possible upstairs. So phones are out of the bedrooms. Again, my wife reluctantly, she clings onto hers like anything. And I still fall into the bad habits as well. If there's something that I really want to watch on Netflix or something, I'll end up with the phone in the bedroom. But what I will do is, and half the time I just do the typical dad thing and fall asleep to it. Yeah. But if I don't, I will take it and move it out of the room before going to sleep. So it's just about trying to have those barriers as much as possible, because it's those types of rules that you're kind of it's a bit like the unplug thing that I alluded to earlier. The more barriers that you can put between you and that content, that digital content that you're trying to access, the greater chance you've got of not falling into the trap. So downstairs we have a rule where if either me or Lee, my wife, are on our phones, the kids can call us out on it, and they can say, do you know what? You need to practice what you preach. And we have a phone jail. So they can legitimately take our devices and chuck them in phone jail.
And just as much, just
as much as we can do it with their devices. It's about having that fair sort of open playing field.
And what would trigger their device going into device jail? What is it? Naughty behavior? Is it? Because I'm intrigued by this, because sometimes I just lose the plot. I'll take the controller off and say, right, you're off it, I can't be bothered. And I'll put it on a cupboard where they can't reach it or something. Should it almost be a risk reward thing? Should we, I made a note of it earlier, should we let Fortnite be a reward? Are we creating too many barriers there? Do we need to just create boundaries rather than have it as a reward, do you think?
So again, it was back I think it was in the first lockdown, we had the Switch conversation. Dexter was 7. Preston will have been 4. So it was a point where we were kind of going, Preston's definitely too young for one. Dexter's kind of, we'd always said, I think I came out with 11. You need to be 11 to have one. I just plucked it out of thin air. So he always kind of thought, right, I'm going to be 11 by the time I get a Switch. But we all had a tough time in lockdown. They weren't able to see their friends. Everybody needed that extra bit of pressure being relieved from parenting duties. So we kind of said, okay, we're going to get them a Switch for the Christmas. However, we need to set some sort of guidelines around this. So we consulted, it was something we couldn't come up with on our own. So we consulted the big man in the North Pole. And on Christmas morning, they ripped open the box and were, flabbergasted that they had got a Nintendo Switch. But with the Nintendo Switch came this letter, right? And this is a letter from Santa. And it's Santa's 10 Nintendo Switch rules.
Brilliant.
Right? And it goes through, we haven't got time, I won't go through them all, but it goes through the fact that, what mummy and daddy say is final. You've got to take responsibility for this. My elves can't fix computers. When it breaks, it's broken. These are very expensive. you know, times of day that you should and shouldn't play on it. This is a gift to share. So you've got to be kind and share with others. And, you know, so there's all of these kind of rules and regulations that Santa very, very kindly included in the present. And I actually caught it on video. It's a brilliant video because he rips open this present and then, you know, and he was only 7, and then he gets this letter. And it's like this moment of, wow, what's this? Almost anticipation that it's another present.
Yeah.
And then he starts reading it, and you can kind of see this wave of responsibility come over this 7-year-old. But he, you know, he stuck to it. And yeah, okay, we're a few years on from that now, and there's bad behavior, and there's times when we have to say, look, you've had it too much. And recently we've had to say no switch during the week. Because it just reached a point where Preston, the younger one, was starting to get some of that rage. You know, he's a bit emotionally charged. So some of that rage would come out, and he just, you know, you could just see, you know, exactly that impact that the technology was having. Yeah. So we just kind of said, look, we sat them down and said, look, guys, this is what's happening. This is how you're reacting. One of the causes is this technology. So, you know, during the week, it's not a punishment, but we just think for now, until we're able to better handle ourselves, during the week is not a switch time. And, you know, and the Santa letter was referred to and things like that. So they, you know, they know from the, but I think what's important is from the point of receiving the gift, they also got the responsibilities. And that's what I talk about, this sort of warning on the packaging or manual that comes with, you know, these devices. I think it's really key that parents need to give that level of understanding when they receive the gift, because otherwise it does feel like a punishment. Whereas if it's the rules from day one, then it's kind of like, well, we accepted these rules when we got the gift. So therefore, you know,
we can't, the packaging,
yeah,
literally.
exactly. Yeah. So, but obviously, you know, you can't do that retrospectively. So, you know, kind of ways and sort of strategies to deal with it is, as I say, to understand that this is far more important to them than it is to us and how we think. But just to try not to use it as a punishment, and to try and explain that you're reacting like it, you know, this way, just like I reacted, and use an example about being stressed at work or something like that. And just, you know, use a bit of an opportunity to say, right, let's get the technology out of the way, and let's, you know, do something fun and go outside or go for a walk or play football or whatever it was.
Yeah, the Fortnite rage is real. My oldest and my middle one, he plays it. He's only 6, nearly 7.
Yeah.
But if they finish 2nd or 3rd, they go off. They shout, they yell, they scream, and that's it. It's a red line. It's like, look, sorry, you need to be able to control what you're doing.
Yeah.
Off it. And then you're right. If it's a nice day, we're out in the garden, they forget about it because they're back doing little boy stuff. Playing football and getting the knees muddy and that, which is what it should be about, in my opinion. But it's tech's here to stay, and I guess just as we head to round it up, I like to challenge guests to offer some quick wins, and I think tech dependency in kids, in adults, is huge. The addiction is a real risk. So what are some sort of quick wins we can do to either check in with ourselves, check in with our behavior towards our kids, check in with our kids? What are the telltale signs that we can look for, and how can we start to take more responsibility, I guess, which is a overarching theme? What would you suggest we can do?
So I think boundaries is really key in the home. So you can, if you set certain zones or rooms as kind of, you'll allow tech in those rooms. But if if you really look at this and reach a point where you're all in the living room, the TV's on, you're all on your phones, there's a laptop out, there's a tablet out, somebody's on a games console, you know, just take a minute and look around and just ask, is this really what we want our family life to be like? When we look back, you know, in 10, 15, 20 years time, you know, do we really want to remember, oh, we had a great family life, you know, we were all on our devices? You know, I talk about kind of an idea of a eulogy. So, you know, it's a bit sad and depressing, but at some point I am going to die. hopefully it'll be before my kids. And they will be reading the eulogy. What do you want that eulogy to say? Do you want it to say he was a great dad, he was always on his phone? He was named after the telephone inventor, he's never off it. Yeah? Or do I want that eulogy to be something else? And I think that's a really important kind of, thing to zone in on, because it's so easy to get sucked into these devices that years will roll by and your kids will grow up like that. It's the age-old saying, but it is so true that they just didn't seem like it was yesterday. And if you don't take those opportunities to genuinely connect with each other and train them and teach them in the importance of human connection, then literally your relationship with your kids, you're going to look back on and you're going to regret that you missed out on the opportunity to have fun with them, to engage with them, just to talk with them. And it sort of amazes me, but I think it's so sad that there are so many teenagers and parents who kind of now go, well, I just don't know who they are, because they're so wrapped up in their own online life that their parents aren't part of. And I just think, well, that's because you haven't given them any alternative. So they've sort of lost that opportunity of connection. And I don't think that will necessarily get repaired. And I think that's something we're running the risk of losing forever, the connection with our kids. So I think that's as important as I think it is. But coming back to kind of things that you can do now, if things are bad and you look around and you think, yeah, we do have problems, there's things that you can do as an individual. There's your screen time settings that you can have a look at. So if you're on an iPhone, settings and screen time, Android is settings and digital well-being. Start diving into those and having a look at your usage and just think about if you're happy with that amount of usage or whether you want to try and take some steps to reduce that. And there's a plethora of apps and tips and ways to do that. But in terms of zones and boundaries in the house, if you're really trying to sort of, get a handle on this, have an area in your house where the phones have to be plugged in. And if anybody wants to go and use their device, they have to go to that spot. And they can't leave that spot until they're finished on their phones. And just watch what happens. Well, straight away, nobody will listen to the rules. So they'll just go and grab their devices and clear off. So then you can take it up to the next level and start to get kind of phone jails and lock boxes and things. You can go as crazy as you want to. But just acknowledge how ridiculous it is, as to how easy it is to pick it up. And if you can remove it from the room and just put a real physical boundary in between you and the devices, dinner table's an easy one. If you're still using your device at the dinner table, make it a rule, right, we're going to eat at the dinner table and we're not going to have phones out. And that's everybody, that's just a fundamental not allowed rule. And watch what happens. It's those moments. It's not going to instantly turn into a Hollywood movie film where you're having these amazing conversations between you and the kids. You're still going to probably hate each other at some degree.
Whimsical music playing in the background.
But it's the first step, and it's those types of things that you need to move towards, and rules and boundaries that you need to set up at home for everyone, not just for the kids. And that's why I think bedrooms, if you can get it out of the bedroom, it's so important that you do that, because it just stops, it stops the temptation of the kids' ability to have a phone next to their bed, because mum and dad have a phone next to their bed, and therefore they're constantly checking all the time throughout the night and waking up and checking it and not having any sleep. It's just such a bad way to live life. So those are kind of, those are options. And the biggest question that I get is, well, get to the teenage years, they need a phone because otherwise they'll get excluded from social circles and all the rest of it. You can buy them a crap Nokia 3210, copy, but they're just going to get equally bullied for having an old phone. So you can't really do that. It's not a legitimate answer. So there is a concept where you have a house shared phone. So you can have the latest iPhone, whatever it is, but it's a device that the kids can pick up and take to school and bring back. But when it comes back, it's a shared device. So if I want to go out and take a phone with me because I need to get in touch with people, if I want to have some way of accessing the internet or accessing my socials or whatever, it's all on there on the device, but it's shared. So whatever I do, the next person who picks it up, there's a chance that they're going to be able to see it, or they'll have a reply that will ping in or something. Yes, there's ways you can hack that and ways that you can delete your browsing history and everything else, but you'd have to go to quite some extremes to be able, exactly. And you will get caught out at some point, and the next person will pick up the device and go, hang on, why is there no browsing history? Why is there all the messages been deleted? Like, you know, red flag, what's going up here? So this idea of kind of transparency and openness, I think, is really key when it comes to technology. And that kind of links back into this idea of having devices in the classroom and even the internet in exams and things. If it's done in a way that their use is open to all. So if you give, you know, primary school kids an iPhone, I think that's dangerous, not particularly good. But if you give them a shared screen that groups of 4 that the teacher can all see, and they're interacting with stuff online, then I think that's a really healthy way of integrating technology into the classroom. Yeah, one idiot might go on a dodgy website that they know isn't picked up by the firewall and isn't blocked or whatever. I remember we used to do that in the IT lessons. You know, you'd figure out a way of sending stuff to the printer that would print 99 copies of like brackets and dots and things that would look like a female body, stuff like that. So there's always ways you can get around it, but they get caught out because it's done in an open forum.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest dangers with the devices is in the personal aspect of them. It's like your little private black
window
book
to the world almost, isn't it?
But if you remove that and you say, well, we're all going to be able to see what you've been doing, you'll be able to see as much as what I've been doing, as much as I'll be able to see what you've been doing, then I think it's a great sort of way to have those more open conversations about the issues that flag up.
Very, very interesting. I really like. I think for me the biggest takeaway from all this, it's on us to almost role model the behavior we want our kids to see. Like a lot of things in parenting, it's not easy, but we've got to check in with ourselves and be responsible for that and control what we can control. We can't control what Facebook do, we can't control what Google, YouTube do, but we can control our response and our reaction to it. And I think that's for me, that's the big takeaway.
And as a final kind of tip to give to, if anybody's dealing with kind of teens who are, you know, really struggling with this, put all of your phones, all of the house phones, in black and white mode. Instagram is just rubbish in black and white.
I didn't even know you could do that.
It's in. If you go into the accessibility settings, it's for kind of visually impaired you know, stuff. So you can, all phones can be, you know, instantly put into black and white mode. You do that and suddenly it's just less appealing, you know, and you can do it. You take it. So, you know, I have my phone, I have a big clunky drop proof case on it, you know, make them less sexy. Right.
Too cumbersome to hold.
Exactly. So that you don't have that feeling of, oh, it's such a, you know, shiny new slim device. Put a massive clunky horrible case on it, and again it just starts to lose its appeal a little bit.
I like that. I'm going to do that to my kids' controllers.
Listen,
Alex, it's been a pleasure chatting. I feel like we could talk for hours.
We could.
Around the topics here. How can we continue a conversation and connect with you? Where can we find about you and your work?
So the only platform I'm on is LinkedIn, because I have to do one. So that's the, you know, the lesser of all the evils. So you can get me on LinkedIn. Just put in Alexander Bell or Alexander P. Bell. I'm sure you'll pop a link to it in the description of this video. So there's that. My website is alexanderbell.co, not .com, because I have a famous name and there's a Frenchman who will not sell me the .com domain. so it's .co, alexanderbell.co, and you can find me on the website there.
Super. Listen, Alex, it's been a great chat, lovely conversation. I'm glad to know it's not just me that finds this difficult at times. I'm sure of us listening and watching will connect with much of what we've spoken about.
And that's the key. Like, you know, I haven't solved this. I don't have the perfect relationship with technology. My kids don't have the perfect relationship with technology, but I'm starting to, to be aware of the problems, and I'm starting to improve stuff. This is going to take time. I got the first iPhone 2007, so I've had my swipe addictions built up for the last 15 years. I'm not going to solve that overnight.
No.
So
it's a relatively new thing for us to be dealing with, 15 years.
So it's just about taking the first step. And if you can just start to introduce this concept of technology isn't all good for us, and we need to have limits and rules and behaviors because there's a whole world out there that we can access, then, that's where you're going to see the change. Yeah.
Learn as we go, and we'll do it together.
But it's not an overnight fix. And this is seriously tough stuff to deal with.
It is. And I think, that first step in awareness, responsibility, and role modeling is a great place to start. Alex, thanks so much, buddy. Really good chat.
Pleasure.
And we'll be in touch, and I'll message you on a device.
Write to me. Write to me. Send me a letter through the post.
Take care, Alex.
Cheers. Bye-bye.